Hi, everybody. This is Eliot Shapleigh. I'm in Austin, Texas, and we have a Tele-Town Hall meeting going on. I want to welcome you to this call. I'm in my office in Austin. We've had a full and busy day today in several committees, and I want to just touch base with everybody back home, let them know what's going on. There'll be about 3, 4, maybe 5 more minutes of making calls. We have maybe 100 folks that are on the Tele-Town Hall meeting right now. And the technology has the capacity to call about 40,000 people. So we're going to see how many El Pasans we get on the line, and then we'll get going in just a bit. So if you don't mind, stay with us for a few more minutes, and then we'll get the Tele-Town Hall conference going. I appreciate you taking the time tonight away from dinner to get on this phone call. I think it's so important that El Pasoans participate and make this work. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a couple of items that we're working on down here, and then at the after we've kind of laid the groundwork for what we're working on, then we'll take some questions from you guys if you've got them and make this into a town hall meeting. I hope that works for everybody. So give me about 30 more seconds until we have folks hooked up, and then we'll get going, okay? Okay, let's get going on this thing and see how we're doing. I'm your state senator, Eliot Shapleigh. I'm in my office in Austin, and what we've got going here is a Tele-Town Hall meeting. What's happening is that folks are being dialed at home, asked to join the telephone conference. So if you're interested in hearing what's going on in Austin, we hope you stay on. You're free to stay on till the end, or whenever you've had your questions answered or kind of hear what's going on, and you need to go eat dinner or something, that's great. I want to talk briefly about jobs and the economy and kind of lay the stage for what's going on in El Paso. About 10 years ago, we called a El Paso Economic Development Summit to lay the groundwork for basic changes to El Paso's economy. You may have recalled that back then we'd lost 30,000 garment jobs. El Paso was really not doing well. We had a fairly high unemployment rate, over 10% at the time. And what we wanted to do was rebrand El Paso around sectors that could create good-paying jobs. And we spent about 2 days in this conference, got all the best experts to come help us, and talked really about 3 ways to rebrand El Paso. The first was to take advantage of Fort Bliss. How could we turn our community into a platform for the future combat system and eventually be the place where new jobs are created from testing, new systems, new software, new development of ways of fighting the wars of the future, and of course taking care of and attending to the needs of Fort Bliss. So that became a #1 opportunity in our community because we had an existing military base that turned out to be the finest place in the country to do a number of things. And BRAC in 2005 and other issues helped our community a lot, and we're now reaping the benefit from that. Fort Bliss right now is going to add 67,000 new troops and dependents, and that economic stimulus to El Paso will be about $3.7 billion a year for a total of $21 billion by 2012. And that's going to be 40,000 additional jobs in El Paso, which is the most significant driver in the El Paso economy now. The second thing that we tackled and tried to reband our community to say, this is where these jobs are going to come from in the future, was to get a 4-year medical school in El Paso and create a true medical center with a foundation around the 4-year medical school and add different elements to that, so you'd have a campus like you see in Houston, like you see in Phoenix, like you see in other parts of the United States, where you've got a medical school, nursing facilities, you've got research in key areas around that, and of course you have all the allied health programs in that area, and you've got teaching hospitals like the great one that we have in El Paso, Thomason, now called the University Health Science, the University Health Center there, And that is now the second anchor of our economy. And we predict that in the next 10 years, there'll be about 25,000 people working at our Medical Center of the Americas. As you know, there's going to be a hospital built. The Thomason just broke ground on that, the Children's Hospital. There are a lot of great people that worked on that tremendous initiative. That'll be about $120 million in hospital bonds, and it will grow about 600 to 800 jobs that are going to be at the Medical Center of the Americas. And the final area I want to focus on is El Paso's prominence as a port and as a manufacturing center. And the key to that is making sure that we have a highly mobile economy. And we have worked real hard to put together a $1.3 billion road project in El Paso County that will finally finish our outer loop and add, with the recent stimulus money from the Obama administration, $146 million of construction on the east side at I-10 and Loop 375. So this is really the El Paso stimulus package. That's what's happening in our community. It's exciting. There's not another community that has that kind of construction program going on. And I want to thank a lot of people that along the way helped make this happen. You had tremendous leadership in the business community, folks like Robert Brown. Ted Houghton's done so much at the transportation part of it. Mayor Cook and this administration is moving so many projects there. UTEP has really had a boom in construction on their campus. You've got $235 million going in at UTEP this year on the biochemistry facility, the swimming and fitness center, and a new bookstore. You've got the basketball complex under construction now right next to the Haskins Center. So it's pretty exciting to see that happen. Now, we're going to have continued job losses in manufacturing. I think when you look at what's happening worldwide and what's happening in the manufacturing sector, particularly in Juarez, we'll see job losses, and it will affect us. But in terms of where we are now compared to Texas and the country, I feel real good about where El Paso is, and I'm just real pleased where we are. So with that, I wanted to kind of open it up to you and find out if you had any questions about this. And the way you can get on and ask a question is to hit 0 if you have a question, and let's get on with your questions. We'll be on this phone call for about another 20, 30 minutes, so let's have a conversation about my favorite topic, El Paso, Texas. So if anybody wants to call in and have a question, let's talk. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Hi, Reed, is this you?
Yes, sir, it is.
Great. Well, you're on, and you're with several thousand El Pasoans, and I think they're anxious to hear your question.
Yes, sir, my question is this. Recently, General Bromberg, the commanding general of Fort Bliss, Texas, instituted a policy that any service member, regardless of where they live, must register their privately owned firearms with the Provost Marshal on Fort Bliss. My brigade individually has made us also fill out a separate sheet for privately owned firearms as well. And it's my understanding that that is against the Constitution and the federal law to hold a private database for privately owned firearms. Do you have a comment on this, or?
Well, let me say I'm a state senator. I'm serving in the state of Texas, and what happens on a military compound, when you look at what laws govern that, General Bromberg is pretty much the guy that's in charge, that creates and enforces those sets of rules and laws that apply to military personnel. If you were off base, if you had private firearms in a part of town that was not on the military compound, then you'd be subject to state law. So I'm pretty sure that when he sets a policy that applies to active duty folks at Fort Bliss, he's going to have a pretty wide latitude in what he wants to say.
Correct, sir, but that is my question. I do live in a part of El Paso, Texas that does not fall under U.S. government control. I live in private housing, and yet the military is still, well, General Bromberg specifically, is still making me register my privately owned firearms with him. And like I said, that's my understanding that is against federal law.
Well, let me do this. I can look into it. I'm going to ask you to do something. If you'll call tomorrow, I want you to talk to Eduardo. Let me give you a number, 800-544-1990. I need to hear specifically where you live and what firearms are we talking about. Are you active duty military?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. Let me check into that, but I'm fairly sure that when a commanding general is dealing with issues that relate to active duty military and military installation, what he is saying has been pretty thoroughly researched. And let me just get back to you, because I can't tell you without getting into the law and trying to find out which law applies.
Okay, sir, no problem. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
I appreciate you. Let's go to the next caller if we can.
Thanks.
We're talking to, is that you, Sandra? Yeah. Hello? Trish, are you on?
Yes, sir, I am.
Hey, great. I'm glad you joined us.
Hi, thank you. I like the fact that we have an opportunity to speak with you like this.
Isn't it great?
Yeah, actually it is. The question I have for you is in regards to the proposed legislation that's going before the Capitol in Austin about the gaming and casino issues and with the Tigua Indians. I know that right now with the economy, jobs are at a prime, and knowing that would open up a lot of jobs. And I wanted to see, I read where Governor Perry is against it. He's more on the conservative side, and I wanted to see what your take on it is, and whether you're going to be opposing or planning to oppose or support it.
Well, I think my position's been fairly clear for a long time. The Tiguas are a Indian reservation, and as such, I view them as having certain abilities to do things that other areas cannot do. If you go up to New Mexico and look at what the Apaches have done, they have taken a reservation and created 5 different ways of putting people to work and creating economic development, including a casino up there in Ruidoso. I don't know if you've been up there. It's a really nice place. And so for a long time, I have backed what the Tiguas want to do in El Paso. I have carried legislation to try and make it happen in the Senate side. What in fact happened was the casino was closed by John Cornyn when he was Attorney General, and in fact all those machines were simply sold to a guy up in New Mexico, and he opened and enlarged the casino there. And so what used to be in El Paso has just moved up the road to Sunland, and those 800 jobs are now in Sunland. And if you go to the parking lot up there, everyone in the parking lot is a Texan that is at the casino in New Mexico, but all the jobs are in New Mexico. So there's Texas money being spent in New Mexico that could be benefiting Texas schools. It could be benefiting the Tiguas in terms of creating health clinics, scholarships for kids. So I think that it's real important that El Paso, that we all try and do what we can to get the Tigua casino back into business. I think it was a entertainment venue in El Paso. I think a lot of people went there and enjoyed it. I think it could add to helping support our schools, and I've supported it for a long time. Do you support it too?
Very much so. I've seen the property deteriorate to almost a ghost town now, and I know some people that lost their jobs when that closed down, and that whole area just shriveled up. So I really see that area be built back up again and get a lot of those jobs back for people.
Well, the ironic part is that when the casino was shut down, when John Cornyn took his actions when he was Attorney General, I had a bill down here that would have opened the casino, and there's a guy named Jack Abramoff. I don't know if you remember that name, but he was a lobbyist up in Washington, D.C., who essentially rallied some opposition to this bill down here so that he could try and pass a bill in Washington, D.C. and make more money as a lobbyist. And that's now the stuff of legend. There are people investigating that. Jack Abramoff himself is now in jail for having done that to various Indian casino interests around the nation. But when you look at El Paso and you look at what was going on in with the Tigua operation 10 years ago, it was a nice environment. There were families that went on the weekends when they had entertainment there. You had folks that came from out of town to spend a little money there when they were coming through El Paso. The restaurant there was nice. And that part of the valley, I think it enhanced, and I've always thought we ought to try and get the Tiguas back into business. So I appreciate you making that call.
The Tiguas in Albuquerque, different tribe, different whole separate thing with Isleta. Tiguas with an I instead of with a Y, and I've seen them in Albuquerque develop theirs from a small, tiny casino like Speaking Rock was to something huge. And I know that our Tiguas here would have the same ambition if they had that opportunity, and I hate to see that it gets shot down. I used to play bingo there just for fun, $5, go and have fun and relax and drink some tea and eat popcorn and have some fun with friends. And for something so simple to get shut down and just totally up in the area, we really need to develop that area again.
Well, I appreciate that call. I couldn't agree with you more. I think it would help that part of El Paso, but it would provide an entertainment venue that I think would bring music and some other things. So I totally agree with you, and I really want to thank you for that call. Let's go now to Celia. Celia's calling in from Central El Paso. Celia, are you there? If you could hit 0,
yes.
That'll help you make a call. Celia, are you there?
Hello?
Hello, Celia?
Yes. Senator, my name is Celia Portillo, and I wanted to thank you. I don't have a question because I do agree about the casino, but I wanted to share something very important with you. I worked at the community college as the director for the health career programs, and I am just overwhelmed with joy to see that we finally got the medical school in town, because we had asked for it a long time ago, and it had never become available. And I can see all the wonderful, productive things that we're doing in this city, and you have my full support.
Well,
and I wanted to commend you on, because I know you've done a lot of good things for the city, and I think, we need to let other people know that you're doing your job.
I ought to keep you on the phone call for the whole time. I want to say that medical school is the most exciting thing. And
that ever happened in this town.
I mean, it is. And you walk on it, and they've got those beautiful new buildings. The people there are so excited. They've got 10 times the number of students that they have space for. Half the school has scholarships to go there so that they get their medical education paid for. The whole community's rallied around the medical school. And there'll be a day when you walk on that campus, and there'll be 25,000 people that go to work there. And it's going to change by itself, and that's apart from the other good things that are happening in El Paso. But that medical school will change our community forever. And I could not be more happy about the way that turned out. When I first started that, I got down here about 10 years ago. In fact, it was 1997, 12 years ago that I got down here. And when I was on the plane, I was talking to a few folks that were on the coordinating board from El Paso. I said, we're going to have a medical school in El Paso. You watch this. We're going to get it going. We're going to make it happen. And you know what they told me? We can't ever make it happen in El Paso.
Yes.
They said,
we tried.
We cannot have that dream in El Paso. And I said, we're going to do it, and if you guys don't believe enough in our town, you ought to get off the coordinating board, because we're going to have that dream. We're going to make it happen, and we're going to have a medical school in El Paso. And really, that's what we need to do more of, is to lay out a vision where we can be a great city and do these things that we should have been doing for years and years and years. And that medical school today is exciting.
I'm very excited, Senator, because my dream came true. It was a 30-year-old dream. I worked with a group of people who had a lot of dreams. We did a lot in this city to bring a lot of things to happen. And I'm very, very excited about Texas Tech and all the new things that are happening at UTEP. And I think that we're going to be a marvelous city if we all work together and if we really try hard to become better.
Well, I'm excited about that. It's one of the greatest things that ever happened in El Paso. And I'm so glad you called, because we work every session to add one more thing. We're going to try and get a building in there. We've got now 4 research centers there. Having research is a huge, huge thing, because you can discover things about diabetes that we didn't know before and help cure it. You can do things in infectious disease. So it is awesome, and you've made my day by calling in. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, and good luck to you.
Let's call, no, I think Mr. Campos is calling if we could.
Okay,
the way to
nice
call in,
talking
the
to
way to
you.
get on is to punt 0, and then you'll be, I'll get on the phone with you. So I think Mr. Campos, Enrique Campos from Central El Paso is on the phone.
Yes, sir. My name's, ecology, ecologically, the media has supported the colonias. Will business be agreed and for regards to Finnish first Americans and new Americans? El Paso has a new people with new ideas, but everyone is looking for to minimize diseases, poverty, and destruction. All of that has already been proven. Can El Paso count on the state to not be discriminated into being promoted into ownership of some kind of property and some kind of a land so they can continue functioning in El Paso?
Well, let's talk about the colonias and why they grew up and what's going on about colonias. Colonias basically are an affordable housing issue. Folks couldn't pay the housing. It wasn't enough available. And so they set out to build their own American dream, went out to places like Sparks, East Montana, and started setting up over time their own home. Sometimes they pulled a trailer out there and set it up. And what happened was some issues that we didn't foresee. There was no water in most of these colonias. There was no sewage. In most of them, there's no lighting, so the streets don't have the lighting that you might expect in other parts of the community. The infrastructure was never put in because it's outside the city limits. So there have been laws put into place now for about 10 years to limit the growth of colonias, and what we're doing is try to come with the water, the sewage, the lighting that will improve the quality of life. I've worked a lot on getting community centers in colonias, and particularly connecting them to computers, because I think computers and technology and the ability to communicate on the internet is a skill of the future that people are going to need if they want to have those kind of jobs. So I think we've done a lot to limit the growth of colonias. The real bigger question is, how can we have more affordable housing for folks so that they can afford to buy a home? I think that was the core issue all along.
Definitely.
Enrique, I really appreciate your call. And if we can, I think we're going to go now to Ada. She's on the west side, has a question about some things that are going on. If you'd hit 0, Ada, we'll put you on the line.
All right, thank you. I really appreciate you doing this. I think you've been a super fine senator for El Paso and the state. I wanted to ask what you think our chances are of getting really top quality professors at the medical school. I know it's going to be expensive because those guys don't come cheap. And the only other thing I would ask about would be property taxes, which are killing us. But
well, you raised two issues, and I want to talk about property taxes. The first bill I passed this session was to give you the right to go and contest your appraised value over the computer. So often, people don't have the time. They can't go over and spend 2 hours at the Central Appraisal District. I know when I got my property tax bill, it didn't reflect at all what the value of my house was based on recent sales in the neighborhood. And the ability to get up and go and protest that is so hard for a lot of people that are working. So we've got a bill. I'm pretty sure we'll get it passed that will make it possible for you to go and protest that value and lower that valuation by filing your protest online. So I think that's a good step in moving in the right direction. Now let's talk about the medical school.
Yeah.
I have been personally on recruiting visits to what I'd call world-class guys. Most of them are on the East Coast, a few on the West Coast, that are doing research in places like Harvard, places like Johns Hopkins. And when you go in, you think, well, I don't think we have a chance of getting this guy to come out to El Paso, but let's give it a try. Guess what? It's the easiest recruiting I've ever been on.
really?
And the reason is that the number 3 guy at a place like Harvard is sitting behind a guy that has extensive credentials. He will never be the number 1 guy at a place like Harvard. He does not have a state-of-the-art lab. He's cooped up in an old building on the south part of the campus. He doesn't have the research budget that he wants. And frankly, when you look at El Paso Juarez and you're thinking about an issue like diabetes, there's not a better place in the country to do that research. And so recruiting these guys really has been easy. The issue is pay. The money that we can afford to pay them out of state budgets is one thing, but we have to supplement that by resort to other monies to try and make sure that we get them the research budget that they need, and that means making sure that we bring with them their team. So you're not just recruiting that professor, you're recruiting 4 or 5 key assistant researchers that come with them. Right. And the thing about the medical school, I don't think a lot of people know, we've got $100 million endowment in the bank already. It's in the bank. Wonderful. It's there. And we haven't even admitted one student. The first student will be admitted in August. And so that's an incredible story about getting that kind of endowment up that goes to helping pay for some of these professors. So that's really, really good news about recruiting these guys to medical school.
That's a very good point, that if you're going to be number 3 at Harvard, you're not going to go anywhere. And that's a very good point. I appreciate that because it's something that I don't think a lot of people think about. So I'm glad recruiting is easy, or easier than it might be anyway. I'm just wondering how much it will affect our property taxes, or will it?
That won't affect your property taxes at all.
Okay.
The funding of the medical school is not property tax dependent at all. Your property taxes, when you get your bill, you'll notice that there are 5 entities on your bill.
Right.
By far, the biggest is your school district. 50% of all that you're paying on your property taxes goes to the school district. So that's where we got to make sure that money's being well spent, that your appraisal is accurate. And frankly, I believe we ought to change Texas tax system to move property taxes way down. I think particularly for elderly, it's almost become unsupportable because your income's not going up. You're living on a fixed pension oftentimes, and your appraised value doesn't reflect at all what your pension is worth. And then your pension's not going up to the extent that your appraised value is, and it's really a problem. A lot of seniors call. They want us to work on it, and I believe we ought to change significantly how we fund schools.
I would very much
that's another issue
that.
for another day.
I'm a 70-year-old living on whatever comes in. So, as you say, my income doesn't go up, but the taxes sure do. And I appreciate that. But you're working on it.
We're working on it, and we're working on making sure that you have the ability to lower your taxes by filing an appraised appeal online, which I think will make a big difference for a lot of people in El Paso.
I like that.
I appreciate you calling. Let's go now to Mary in central El Paso and see if she's got a question. Mary, if you'll hit the 0 on your telephone button, you can ask a question.
Hello, Senator.
Hey, Mary, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Excellent. Fantastic.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's great to have the ability to participate in a dialogue like this. I wanted to bring up what you mentioned about the future of El Paso as a port and manufacturing center, and in relation to the environmental impacts and the impact on our water resources and other limited resources. And I know that you have always been very progressive and proactive in defending our environment here in El Paso and the desert region. And at the same time, it's one of the things that seems to be oftentimes sacrificed as we look to growing our manufacturing sector. And particularly here on the border, it's such a sensitive issue because we also have to, of course, deal with all of the use of resources and environmental toxins that enter the environment because of Mexico's activities. And so I guess I'm taking a long time to ask, but how do you foresee maybe a more, how should we say it, a 21st century approach to to taking care of our environment and protecting it for future generations at the same time while we're generating jobs and growth?
Well, you asked the question of the decade. I think every nation, I think every community is wrestling with that, and certainly when you factor in issues like climate change, it's a sensitive, thoughtful, long-term issue that we're going to have to spend much more time on. I want to take just El Paso and answer your questions because I love El Paso. I grew up there. I know it well, and I can answer that a little bit better than maybe the global question of how you balance those two. My view is that we need to celebrate the environment in El Paso and make it much larger in the lives that we lead and how we sell El Paso as a community and what is too. And if you look at El Paso, the elements of the environment that are so wonderful and so different about El Paso are the 24,000-acre state park, the river, which is an enormous asset, and the surrounding desert areas, particularly those that are in state parks or wilderness-type areas where you can hike or maybe make a day of it. I've taken my son canoeing on the Rio Grande. I don't know a lot of folks that do that, but you can go up just north of Anthony, put a canoe in, and come down the river, and it's just awesome. There's now a bike trail on the Rio Grande. If you go to the river on both sides, you can take a bike trail for dozens of miles and follow the river and make it a day. We're working with the school district to start a program called Eagles Rock, where kids learn about going in the outdoors early in life, get off the computers, get outside, and get outdoors where they can enjoy it. And we've spent a lot of time in developing the Franklin Mountain State Park. One of the issues that we're going to try and get done this session is to build a visitor center for the state park that will celebrate the Chihuahua Desert environment. If you've been to Tucson, they've got a wonderful living museum over there based on the Sonoran Desert, and we're taking that model and bringing it to El Paso and create a visitor center so you've got a much broader experience in enjoying the outdoors where you can learn about what you're looking at in the Chihuahua Desert, both the flora and the fauna. So I think the first thing is to celebrate what we have and then try and put in place those key investments that will make it easier for more people to access and enjoy the environment in El Paso, Texas. I think it's one of the great things about our community. On the other side, we've got to be much more vigilant, and we've got to be much more aggressive about polluters, folks that are hurting that environment, like ASARCO. And I think that ASARCO fight was something that was so important for El Paso's future because for over 100 years, that plant defined a community. It held us back, in my view.
Yeah, you don't
and
have to tell me.
7,000, pardon me?
I said you don't have to tell me, I know.
Well, I think it was really an important piece of our history to say no to 7,000 tons more of air pollutants in El Paso, and now try and attract the higher tech, better paying jobs that will come with the medical center, that will come with developments at UTEP, that will come with the design manufacturing part of manufacturing, that will improve our jobs profile and our tax base. And so there were a lot of elements of that ASARCO fight that I think were very important for our future. So all I can really say is we need to celebrate that's wonderful about our environment, put in place key investments, educate our youth on how important it is to respect and enjoy the environment. And when it comes to companies like ASARCO, polluters who really are not obeying the rules, that are not respecting the environment, to deal with them in an appropriate way. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, it begins to, yes. It certainly, you're working to create a culture, I think, a cultural change that appreciates the environment more and is more focused on it, and I think that's a key piece. But I also think a key piece is our conversation with Mexico on how we preserve this desert environment. And I'm wondering, is that something because we're two countries? Is it something that really is not on the table? It's nothing that we can really take forward, or is it something that that is foreseen as an important conversation to be having? I do believe some things have been done, and in fact, didn't we have, Senator, didn't we have some sort of a collaborative effort where the brick makers in Juarez a few years ago were given some sort of support from
we
the
did.
United States.
That was that that was an excellent example of working together across actual international boundaries to try and do something that benefits the whole region. There's 2.8 million people in El Paso, Juarez. So what you're referring to is a bill that I worked on back in 1999. And the idea was this: you've got an air shed, you've got pollutants in the air, they cross borders. A lot of it comes from unpaved streets in Juarez. A lot of it comes from bricks that are being made in Juarez where they're using tires in the kiln to fire the bricks. In other words, they burn tires. That gets into the air, comes across, and it's part of our air shed. So we worked on a bill that said if there's a fine levied on the U.S. side, that fine can be applied in an international setting to the air shed where it'll do the highest and best use. And it's being employed right now to build new kilns in Juarez, take the old ones out of commission, clean up the air, and it had enormous effect. I think the air quality in El Paso in the last 10 years has improved dramatically. I think most of that has to do with the SARCO not being up and going. But these issues are complicated because you've got 2 nations and 3 states. I was the chair of the lawmakers of all 10 border states, Mexican and U.S. states, and we had meetings, and that organization continues to meet once every quarter on these issues. And I would say the chief challenge that lies ahead for us is to understand and become much better stewards of our water resources. When you look at aquifers, when you look at transboundary aquifers, when you think about how we're going to afford to extend water and infrastructure to those in our area, it's a finite resource, and we need to look at it that way, and we need to expand our conversations with Juarez and look at it in a way that's responsible to the water resources and to make sure that in the future they're sustainable. So you ask a good question. We're working on it. There's a lot on my website. If you go to my website and look at shapleigh.org, you can get to the section on water and the environment and read about the different aquifers that underlie El Paso, from the Mesilla Bolson to the Hueco Bolson, and see what we're doing in that regard. But I appreciate your question, and I'm so pleased that you called and pleased that you're participating in this town hall meeting. Let's go if we can.
Too, sir.
You bet. Let's go to the west side, and let's talk to Dean. I think Dean's calling in. If you that want to call in, if you would just press 0 on your phone, you'll be put into a line, and then we can get your phone call and answer your questions and have you participate with us on this town hall meeting. Dean, are you there?
Yeah. Yes,
great.
I am. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm glad you called in.
Well, Senator, we just wanted to thank you first for giving us the opportunity. This is very cool. This is something we've never heard of before, and we like that you're bringing the political system to the people where it belongs. And we applaud you for doing that and watching you do that over the years.
Well, you know, you try and do your best. I tried to be the first in the Senate with the website. I think it's the best in the Senate. I think it is. I try and get out to town hall meetings all across El Paso whenever I can. But this technology is phenomenal. There are 13,000 people who've gotten phone calls today. There's 5,400 on the phone call with us now. And I think it's a great way to visit about what's happening in Austin, bring Austin closer to El Paso, answer questions, try and let people get involved in the process. If there's a bill you're interested in, we can tell you how to get online to get to it. But I appreciate you participating, because it's your participation, frankly, your vote that makes us better.
Well, I'll make this question real quick. We also participated with the SARCO and went out with signs with our family. I have a family of 6, and we all participated in that and went around the doors, and we felt like we were a part of it, and congratulations on that. We're all very happy about that. That was a great job. Yeah.
Well, so I like to think it was a community effort, and certainly your participation, letting your voice be heard, made a huge difference. But I'm going to tell you, it was those students at UTEP thinking about the future and letting all of us know that it was not okay to have a lead smelter, later a copper smelter, right next to UTEP. You can't have UTEP in downtown grow into the kind of places we want them to be, with a giant smelter right on your border. And I think other cities found that out in the 80s, and they did something about it. I'm just pleased that we got into the issue and made a big difference. And I think you're going to see the next phase be the reuse of Asarco. That is that's the historic Pass of the North site. That's exactly where the Rio Grande comes through, the tail end of the Rocky Mountains and the beginning of the Sierra Madres. That's maybe the most historic place in El Paso Juarez. And if you go back to the 1925 city plan, there were wonderful plans that people had envisioned for that place. They had a lake that they thought of putting right there, because that's a place where the Rio Grande flows and goes through some elevation. It's a perfect place to build a small cofferdam and have a lake and a nice river lake environment. And they actually had that sketched out in the 1925 city plan, and I'm just hopeful we can come back and revisit what the highest and best use of that place is. We went over to UTEP. The students said, why don't we do a research park there? Perfect place to do a research park. I think that's exactly the kind of thinking that we need to bring into El Paso, and I'm just so pleased the students got involved in the issues of Asarco.
Well, that leads me to the question I called for, which was I just wanted to find out about the roads on the west side, the neighborhood roads, Kern, Mission Hills area. Is there anything in the plans to freshen those up a bit? Because some of them are pretty bad.
You ask. I like the word that you use, freshen them up a bit. If you go on Stanton Street these days, you're going to lose your axle almost. There's a lot of potholes on that street, and it's not a pleasant trip. Those are all, with the exception of Mesa, those are all city roads. And I-10 and Mesa are the state roads, and we've spent a lot of time and money trying to bring them up to, I think you're going to find that the state roads generally are better kept because there's money to do it. There's going to be a major west side extension of the border highway that'll be built over the next 5 years that will change the way people on the west side commute and go through that area around Asarco and UTEP. There's going to be an exchange at UTEP itself that's going to be, I think, when you go to a football game at UTEP, it'll make a huge difference in getting into the stadium and making all that stuff work. But those streets that you're talking about, Stanton, some in Sunset Heights, that have that washboard effect because they haven't been kept up, that's really a city issue, and you're going to need to call, I think that's Beto or Rourke's area, it might be Ann Lily's, might want to give them a call to say, when is this on your city repair and paving schedule, and when can I expect you guys to be out in this part of town to get that paved?
Senator Shapleigh, but isn't some of that money that's coming in going to be cordoned off to give to this city for construction of roads?
Well, a lot of it is coming to the city for CDBG and other grant programs, but the bulk of the road money is going through the Texas Department of Highways. And so what you're going to see is a list of projects that have been in El Paso. You can go to the MPO website and find all the projects and where they are in the stages. The bulk of money that's going to be spent in the Obama stimulus package on Texas Department of Transportation and Highways is going into an exchange on the east side, I-10 and 375, because it's such a huge undertaking and it affects so many people on the east side. So it will draw most of the stimulus money into that project. That will free up other money to be used. But again, those projects are state highway projects like Mesa, like I-10, and so there will not be this kind of stimulus money spent on street repairs. There'll be some in transit. You're going to see a little bit better transit, more money coming into transit. But that really is a city paving project priority. And so if you'll call city streets, if you'll call your city rep, they can tell you where Stanton is, where those streets are on the paving schedule.
Oh, I will do that. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
You bet. And thank you so much for calling. I appreciate it. We have time to get two more questions. I'm going to have to go off to another meeting. I'm sorry, I kind of overbooked tonight. But Lupe from Central, if you will hit 0, we'd like to get on with you and talk about some issues that you wanted to talk about Mexico.
Senator?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Lupe, and I was just calling to first congratulate you on the wonderful forum, but then secondly to ask you about, we've heard some wonderful things about the progress that El Paso has made. I'm wondering whether this violence in Mexico and the influx of people leaving the violence is being considered at all by the legislature. Are there any plans or thoughts about helping El Paso?
Well, you ask an important question, and the issue is the violence in Mexico. And let me say it is horrific. I have many friends in Juarez. The mayor there is a personal friend. To watch him get on TV and let his police chief go and then move to El Paso for his own safety is tragic. What is happening with violent criminal drug cartels is a threat, and it is something that we all have a stake in fixing. Now, having said that, let's separate out these issues. There are local responses. What are the El Paso police and sheriffs doing? There are state responses. What is the state of Texas doing? And then finally, what is the federal government doing? And since it is an international border, and since Mexico is a sovereign nation, I want to start first with the federal government. The federal government, about a year and a half ago, initiated a conversation with Mexico called the Mérida Initiative. And under that conversation, Mexico, for the very first time, took significant resources for the United States targeted at drug cartels. Almost all of that had to do with equipment, Humvees, helicopters, aviation equipment, and some in training resources. What is the issue at the federal level? The Mexicans must have a better federal police force. If you go back into our history in Chicago, when gangs were running wild and people like Al Capone were running alcohol during Prohibition, and you had a fair breakdown of society in parts of Chicago, particularly on the South Side, the response of our government was to move in with a federal independent police force to clean it up. That guy's name was Eliot Ness. I kind of like his first name. The point being this: Mexico's police functions are not working. The state police, the municipal police in Juarez, are no longer functioning. And Mexico must develop a federal police initiative, an independent police force operated out of the president's office that is corruption-free, or this will not work. So that's the first challenge. And I have written both the president and the new Secretary of Homeland Security, who, by the way, was the governor over in Arizona, to beef up those resources so that President Calderon can have a better chance of dealing with those narcos in Juarez today. That's a very important point. The second part of that is, what's the state doing? I'm going to tell you the state response has not been good. Rick Perry spent a lot of time putting up border cameras that frankly do nothing, and not spending the time on DPS. DPS is the agency, it is the police agency at the state level that can pull together the kinds of investigations, the kind of targeting, the kind of information, the kind of forfeiting that will really be effective. Now, if you remember back in New York, back in the 80s, New York, the city police of New York and their state police and the FBI coordinated a very effective response to the mafia that was importing black tar heroin from where? Sicily. And what they did is got a very effective strategy of identifying the kingpins, identifying their stash houses, taking their cash away from them, and putting people in jail. That's what we need to do in El Paso, Texas. That's what we're working on this session.
Okay.
Finally, local.
Let
me get the whole picture out there, and then we can talk about the pieces you want to talk about. Locally, we've got the third safest community in the country, and it's so because we've got a police manning table, sheriff, and on top of that, there's 18,000 border patrolmen that are covering the southern border of the United States. So El Paso, relative to other communities, is fairly safe. Will some of that spill over? I think most of us believe that it will. Are we doing the things that we need to locally? I believe so. Are we doing them at the state level? We need to do much more at the state level.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm just hoping that that is considered when monies are being allocated so that we can beef up the local police, so that we can beef up the security, so that we can beef up the system in place to be able to address those demands that are going to come into El Paso. And I just say that as a closing thought, and I appreciate very much this forum, and I appreciate you doing this. I know.
Well, I appreciate you getting on. I really do. I think your participation and questions make our democracy that much better. And I think the beefing up that you're asking us to do is exactly what we're focused on. I've had the DPS in here all session. There's about a $135 million program in the state budget that we're going to try and get done this session. It will create a DPS team in El Paso that we didn't have before. They will be forensic detectives that will be looking at identifying kingpins and getting these guys targeted for arrest. They'll work with the Mexicans to see where we can get folks that are arrested in Mexico put in the United States for prosecution. That's really an important part of the whole strategy, because in Mexico they tend to be able to continue to run cartels. In the United States they cannot. And so there's a lot that we're doing that I think will have a dramatic effect, but the beginning is in Mexico. And the beginning of an effective turnaround is really in a federal police force in Mexico that works. We have time for one more question, and I'd like to go, if we could, to Ms. Robles. I think she has a question about the stimulus package, and see if we can answer her questions.
Well, hello, Senator. I am ever so proud of having you as our representative in the Senate of the state of Texas. You really do a wonderful job. You really address the issues that are not only relevant to our community, but to this whole state.
Well, Belen, I have been friends of yours for a long time, and your leadership, both at the state and national level, was remarkable, and I think the work that we're all doing in El Paso is making a big difference. I really do.
Exactly. Working together. And on a personal basis, Senator, I do want to tell you how proud we are of the support you have been giving to the El Paso Community College. You know that that educational institution is so important to our community, and through your assistance and help and support, we have been able to create some really wonderful programs that are benefiting our community. So I wanted to make those comments to you. I have made them to you personally, but I think others need to know the wonderful job that you're doing. Now, going to my question, you made reference to unemployment and the fact that unemployment will probably continue to grow. And we have been very fortunate that our unemployment situation in El Paso is probably not quite as bad as other places due to many of the initiatives that are going on in the community with the growth at Fort Bliss. But nonetheless, we know that we need to look after the many that are unemployed. And for those of us that are out in the community and see so many people struggling to make ends meet when they're out of a job, it's really heartbreaking. Now, I read in the newspaper that our governor has opted to reject funding for the unemployed. And my question to you, Senator, is whether the legislature has plans to override the decision of the governor and make sure that that money does come to Texas.
I think that's a great question. The issue is on unemployment insurance. Now, how does that work?
Right.
The way that works is that employers set aside a small amount of money, and the state takes that and creates a fund. If a person is unemployed, that covers certain basic payments, and that covers certain expenses for a period of weeks. It's called unemployment insurance. The Obama administration is sending Texas $555 million to handle what is anticipated to be 300,000 people that will be unemployed this year. and we anticipate that unemployment is going to rise through 2009 and probably taper off some in 2010. That's the news that we're getting. That's what the comptroller is telling us. And so this money is a way of beefing up that program, making the payments to those that lose their jobs, and frankly, making sure that Texas businesses don't see their taxes hiked in order to pay for the unemployed. It is money from the federal government that really is addressing a key problem that if we don't take it, employers are going to have to pay more money. The other alternative is that they're going to pay the money themselves. So it makes absolutely no sense to leave this money on the table. I have filed in the Senate a bill to permit the state legislature to go around the governor. The bill that was passed in Washington, D.C. has a procedure in it that if a governor is taking a position and the Senate and the House both agree that they'd rather take the money, it makes better sense, then they can take it. And we're doing everything we can to move that bill so that this state takes the $555 million so that those Texas families who through no fault of their own have lost their job can get unemployment insurance so they can pay their home mortgage, so they can put food on the table. I mean, it makes really no sense to leave that money on the table. So that's exactly what we're doing, and I'm glad that you brought that up because it's an important issue this session.
Well, Senator, I want to thank you for providing us this forum to inform us because, after all, the way that our state can be better, the way that we can address issues on a local and state level is to be informed. And I want to applaud the fact that you do everything within your power to keep us informed so that we can react whenever it is necessary.
Well, I want to thank you for calling. And for those callers who didn't get your questions answered, I want to apologize. Here's what we can do. If you will leave a voicemail, there'll be instructions that you'll get over the phone from this technology on how to leave a voicemail. We'll get back to you. It probably won't be all tonight, but we'll try and get back to you tomorrow. And then for those others that have a question, get on my website. It's at www.shapleigh.org. And if you'll leave your question there, if you'll send it in to us, we'll get back to you. And I want to thank everybody in El Paso for participating. We had a record tonight of 8,027 people that participated on this conference call tonight, which I think is tremendous to show the interest that people in our community have in what's going on. It's a great community. I love representing El Paso, and I truly thank you for letting me serve you down here in Austin, Texas. So with that, good night for tonight, and we'll do this again before the end of the session. If you've got friends and family, ask them next time to join us so that they can find out what's going on with their state government in Austin, Texas. Thank you, and good night.